The Epstein files are coming, at least some of them, and that's because of some brand new court rulings about grand jury materials, which almost never come out. I'm Ari Melber, lawyer, journalist. This video is going to show you what it means that several judges, 3 in fact, have just ruled that Epstein files that were secret from their origin, secret forever basically until now, will be coming out. And then I'm going to show you a timeline here from our studio about what we've learned in the long, sordid, and often failed effort to get justice against Epstein and for his well-known survivors. These rulings are really important because if you follow anything in law and order or even true crime, I bet you know that grand jury materials are secret. They are hidden. And that's for a good reason. The grand jury might indict someone, in which case stuff becomes public later, or they might not, in which case the fact that the police, prosecutors presented evidence against someone doesn't mean that they should then be embarrassed in public over something that didn't even have evidence to try them. So it kind of makes sense, right? And so we have federal laws. In fact, there's a rule of evidence, Rule 6, Federal Rule 6, that talks about why grand jury materials are usually secret. And that's always been the case. But there's a new law in town. It's the law that many people thought would never be passed, that Trump fought against all year, the Epstein Transparency Act. And so one of these rulings, I've got several, is from a judge that basically says the United States seeks to unseal grand jury materials. Now, they're doing this in both Epstein cases. There's the one in New York where he died before trial, famously. There's one in Florida, which was criticized as kind of a sweetheart deal. And there's the Maxwell case. But the rulings have been the same in all 3. And so what you have here is basically judges saying, hey, grand jury materials are always secret. But the new law overrides the old law. And if people are cynical and say, okay, but you can't trust the government or the Trump administration to do this, I get that. And I think that's why you need journalists and pressure and public advocates. But what's interesting here is, in this case, it's the Trump administration that actually filed to get these Epstein documents. Now, if you're a cynic or you're skeptical, you might say, okay, but they weren't doing that before. And you're right. They ultimately were pushed into this, and we followed that history. I'm not going to do a whole political breakdown, but having been pushed on this, they now are asking for it, and they've won these cases, which means in a process that Donald Trump himself and his aides don't fully control, there is now legal order saying unseal the materials. Now, a note of caution, one judge said in the Maxwell case, where she's already been tried and convicted, the judge didn't think there was going to be a lot of bombshells in those materials because of what I mentioned earlier. There's been a trial, so a lot of that stuff had come out. And in the old Florida case, that was where Epstein basically got a lenient deal. But what about the case that he died before he was tried in? There may be grand jury materials there that are very interesting. And the final point on this is, we are going to watch how DOJ responds to a law that requires them to release the other remaining Epstein files. If they over-redact, or if they say there are all these exceptions and they shouldn't have to share much, I can assure you there will be efforts to bring them to court, whether it's from the Congress that passed this, they can take the administration to court, that happens pretty often, or from others who say, hey, we got these 3 rulings saying the new law is in town, and the new law means more transparency than before. So that's a big breakthrough. You can always subscribe to my YouTubes for these breakdowns. Next, as promised, I'm going to show you our timeline and our reporting on how this all started back from the original Epstein case, some of the lobbying and really dirty dealings that went into getting him leniency, and then what we learned over time. So that is next. The Epstein case has many details and open questions. Our timeline today focuses on the key facts and developments, starting in March 2005, when local police in Palm Beach, Florida, began a probe into Epstein, investigating reports of abusing victims as young as 14. The local case led to Epstein's indictment for a single count of soliciting prostitution in 2006, not the more serious alleged conduct. In fact, the lead detective in the Palm Beach office referred the case to the FBI to look at the more serious crimes, and those federal investigators began probing allegations. In 2008, Epstein reached a deal with the Bush administration's federal prosecutors to take that local Florida conviction for soliciting prostitution with an adult and a minor. Epstein got a lenient, short prison sentence and an unusual agreement that the Bush DOJ would not prosecute Epstein further, or 4 of his co-conspirators, or any others. Bush DOJ prosecutors also agreed to keep the deal secret and not inform Epstein's victims about it. A judge later found the Bush DOJ's secrecy deal was illegal, violating those victims' rights. So the facts show from the start, Epstein got this unusual protection from the government in this period, a Republican administration, Bush. And Epstein was a rich, powerful figure. He had ties to people in business and politics. He hired a Republican-connected lawyer, former independent counsel Ken Starr, and served just 1 year in that deal. Now, another 9 years went by, and then the Miami Herald reported an Epstein expose on the allegations of his conduct and that Bush-era prosecutor who cut the sweetheart deal. That investigative report gained traction, partly because of a tie to Trump, who promoted the very prosecutor, Alex Acosta, to his cabinet. The headline at the time hammering how a now Trump official gave a serial sex abuser the deal of a lifetime. And that public pressure from the Herald drove a new federal probe. Internal DOJ reviews would show Acosta had poor judgment in the case, and that the blanket immunity offers for Epstein and others were just indefensible, leading to a fairly swift federal indictment of Epstein on far more serious sex trafficking charges. And the pressure drove the original prosecutor Trump had promoted, Acosta, to resign around this time. And in a key decision, a judge denied Epstein bail, forcing him to be incarcerated before any trial. It was just over a month later, August 2019, when Epstein was found dead in his cell. The situation was suspicious. Officials there broke several protocols. Epstein was a high-profile detainee. He'd been placed on suicide watch, which was then quickly lifted. Guards failed to do required inspections the very night of his death. And a lot of questions were hanging over all of this. So let's go even further ahead, all the way up to 2019 and what happened after that. Because key videos went missing. Trump Attorney General Barr even admitting the prison made mistakes then, but claiming that he personally reviewed prison video which showed no one entering the cell. And with Epstein dead, prosecutors turned to a co-conspirator who might have benefited from that original Florida case being shut down, what I told you about. They went ahead and indicted Epstein Maxwell for helping Epstein's sex trafficking, a case brought by a career prosecutor, Maureen Comey, daughter of former FBI Director Comey. And her work continued on when the Biden administration took over. She won Maxwell's conviction and this 20-year prison sentence. Then, during the 2024 campaign, the questions and theories about Epstein's crimes and special treatment were heating up on the right. It was a problem for Trump, given that he promoted the original prosecutor, that he oversaw the DOJ, which failed to answer questions or have transparency about whatever happened in that prison cell. So Trump tried to go on offense, vowing to declassify and release Epstein's files. And his attorney general took over that message and advanced it in office, now infamously claiming that she had the client list on her desk, which she later contradicted because shortly after, the DOJ released an alternate video from the prison. But the key video that shows Epstein's cell door is either lost or hidden. It's never been released. And Bondi released the now infamous memo that said they wouldn't provide any other Epstein documents. So Bondi went from saying there was a client list to there wasn't. She was lying then or lying now. The DOJ memo then said there was no other Epstein info that was going to be released, which ignited that firestorm of criticism we all lived through. And given the broken vows, that couldn't hold. Trump soon contradicted his own DOJ's memo and saying he would try to get grand jury material released, but those are limited transcripts. A lot of the big Epstein information is in the Trump DOJ. They could release it anytime. One judge has denied this. And as the Trump administration's contradicting claims drew more heat on its secrecy, the DOJ then sent this former Trump criminal defense attorney to interview Maxwell in prison and then transferred her to a better prison, an apparent reward for the one person doing any time for Epstein's indicted federal crimes. In July, Trump's DOJ also fired the top prosecutor who won the case against Maxwell, Comey, an unusual ousting of a career prosecutor with no public explanation. So what does this timeline show? That Epstein got help and special treatment and sometimes unlawful benefits from the very federal government that claimed to be investigating him. It happened under the Bush administration, with officials later promoted by Trump. The Trump DOJ only picked up the case in the first term after journalists reported those revelations. Epstein's unusual death met with total secrecy by the first Trump term. And the prosecutor who busted Epstein's co-conspirator, ousted in the second term, while Trump and other officials made false, sometimes knowingly false statements about this public history. This is a damning account of President Trump's approach to this case in government. Now, this is a serious governing problem for President Trump and the DOJ and obviously the impacted victims. Even if we learn nothing else about this, it's an open scandal for this administration. And then there are the glaring and inconvenient facts that go back even further before Trump was in government, before the lengthy timeline we just saw. Because as a civilian, Trump had a long relationship with Epstein, who had bought property near Mar-a-Lago, socializing with Trump, engaging in activities, and both men then referring to Epstein's sexual controversies. The two men partied together. They appeared in public and before cameras. This is footage from a Mar-a-Lago event in 1992. Epstein went to Trump's wedding in 1993. And while Trump famously likes his own jet with Trump branding, he found the time and reasons to fly on Epstein's private jet at least 7 times, per the New York Times. Trump photographed with both Epstein and Maxwell in 2000, again at Mar-a-Lago. And the Journal reported about how Trump drew those bawdy sexual references in a birthday card for Epstein, citing, quote, wonderful secrets. Trump denies this and is suing the Journal over it. He now claims his Epstein friendship was shorter than reported, that they clashed over an employee Epstein had poached from Mar-a-Lago, while other accounts say Epstein was a Mar-a-Lago member until 2007, over a year after that original indictment we showed you. Trump breaking the vow to release more Epstein files, but he's also in them, according to recent Journal reporting. And as for Epstein, he was secretive about any time that the two men might have spent with minors when pressed under oath.
You ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
Legally, these social links alone are not evidence of a crime. They are evidence of a conflict of interest, the kind of link that requires a judge or prosecutor to recuse from a case. But Trump has been doing the opposite, commenting and intervening, his DOJ's actions on Epstein repeatedly putting secrecy over facts, politics over accountability, and, as we saw in the recent controversy, a special transfer and leniency for an actual sex trafficker over justice for the victims. There has been a lot of talk about Epstein, and at the core, this is a case that matters so much to the many people, many victims whose lives were forever altered by Epstein and Maxwell. But you don't need even more Epstein documents, though people are pursuing them, or more facts to understand the raw outline of this case. Some of it predates Trump, with Bush-era prosecutors cutting a deal with a powerful person and cutting out the victims from even learning about it. But much of it involves Trump, from the personal social links to a government that he is overseeing, that after all of the talk and claims for justice and demands for truth in this sex trafficking case, the big thing the Trump administration has done is continue the secrecy, continue to cut the victims out, and, most astoundingly, help and serve an Epstein sex trafficking co-conspirator over truth or justice for the victims. Hey, it's Ari and 50. Don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.